Hey guys, Brent Hull Build Show. We're done. The Thistle Hill, the historic restoration's done. Come join me, I'm going to show you all the awesome details.
Dozens of Fort Worth residents have been fighting to save the Winfield Scott Mansion near downtown.
This is Fort Worth's best known historic mansion, Thistle Hill. The roof is completely destroyed.
Look at it, guys. Austin, pause this thing and just show them a bunch of B-roll because this thing is fantastic. Really what you're doing is you're looking at Thistle Hill as close to 1911 as it's been since probably 1911. You think about the history of this house. 1904 is built, it was changed in 1911. It became a girls' home in the 50s. It was abandoned and almost demolished in the 70s. Really for 40, 50 years, it just kind of speaks well of the house that it lasted in as good a condition as it was before we started the restoration. But the new owner has done an incredible job allowing us to really take it back to exactly the way it was. This is awesome. Let me show you the details. You're starting to see the magic, and we'll just start at the front gates. Remember, 1904, 1911, cars are kind of and so people would have parked their buggy and carriage here and walked up to this house. And so this is the first view of it. Look at this ironwork, right? The restoration is complete and done, but the way this ironwork is made, the way that these welds are put together, the way that the strapping is done, the strength of it, the character of it, and then the only thing we've really done is we've put some bumpers on it, some hydraulic bumpers that are going to keep the gates from swinging and banging and causing problems. We've rebuilt the brick piers. We put a concrete pier inside there, and then we hung these metal brackets on a steel thing stuck in the concrete. Then we redid it. We restored the stonework, but this was done by a guy over in Dallas, Ron Stiebler, who's a friend, who's a restorationist. What it is basically a hydraulic stop that is going to keep this from swinging and closing and causing problems. But this is super heavy. Ron rebuilt these original locks, they're banner ironworks from St. Louis, Missouri. These would have been bought. I oftentimes encourage people when they're doing historic ironwork, especially gates, to actually put a working lock just the way they used to be done. That's the way it used to be done. It's pretty cool. Just walking up to the house, you know, just kind of this magic. All the stonework cleaned up, the brickwork completely repointed, nearly $1 million in brickwork. All of the fence that was tilting down on these walls, the ironwork that's been completely redone. And now the magic of this awesome stairway. Look at the level of detail and the level of quality, okay, that was incorporated into this porch. Marble steps, marble treads, really cool. Tile porch. This is one of those things, it's not a concrete porch, it's not a wood porch, it's done in tile. Really, the nicer houses would have done the porches in a material like this. And so already this is elevated. I love this entryway. We've spent a lot of time staying in those front porches, but now seeing it all cleaned up, seeing it all beautiful again is really fun. The roof was kind of a tricky deal, okay? Because what happened is we had a Ludovici tile, which we think was original to the house. We show it on the Sanborn maps, which are the fire maps, that would have shown that this originally had a tile roof. There was a huge hailstorm that came through Fort Worth in the mid-90s and basically destroyed all of these Ludovici tile roofs. And because Ludovici was so backed up, they actually got a different tile company's tile on there that was a green tile. So the color was right, but the weight of that tile was, I think, twice as heavy as the Ludovici. Now Ludovici, you know, I'm a big fan of that, but they actually fire their clay, and so that the absorbency rate and the quality of clay in the tile actually is superior. You may remember I went on that tour of their facility and looked at all that stuff. And so we went back with the Ludovici tile roof, which reduced the weight by like 60,000 pounds on this roof. Now, some of the repairs and some of the things that they've done on this property over the years was to support the roof, was the framing. There's a big steel beam in the attic that they had put on 10 or 15 years ago because of the sagging of the roof. So it really was a problem. And we've gone with the Ludovici slate tile roof on the Carriage house. That was a maintenance decision. We're not sure exactly what the tile was. It shows in the sandboard mass maybe it was wood. We have evidence that there might have been some tile in there. Certainly it was framed up to carry the tile. So we made a decision to go back with something that's historically appropriate, though we don't know exactly what it was. We did a lot of research trying to dig into to figure out what it was. But the roof's now completely redone. The copper, the flat seam copper, all these 100-year products that we put back onto this house. I mean, this house is going to last, what is it, 120 years? Easily another 120 years, because it's been restored and brought back to its magic. Really, I love looking at this because everything looks so pristine. The brickwork, stonework, the new copper, the windows, there was a complete window restoration. And remember, right here under this roof, that was completely rotted out. And there was a number of places on this front portico that had rot in them. And that had, you remember I was up there just kind of pulling that wood down. Now you look at it, and it's funny because here's where I know how big those corbels and those modillions and dentils are. I mean, they're huge blocks. They look appropriate from here. They don't look too big, and yet I know how big those are, and I know the work that went into those, so it makes me appreciate it a lot more. But we had a lot of roof problems, okay? The original copper gutters the seams had broken, and so we've gone back with an underlayment underneath the Ludovici tile roof and redid the copper all around on the roof on top. So there's inline gutters, which is pretty typical of that period. That's why you see this downspout coming out of the soffit, because it's not a gutter like we would stick on the front of a house. It's actually in the roof line. And so they hid the gutter in the roof line so that it became much more of an architectural piece. And if you watch my videos on the K gutters, the molded gutters, why does my gutters have a molding on the front? It's because of this architectural arrangement that you would have done with your cornice and everything else to make your roof line look appropriate. One of the things you'll notice about gutters from the turn of the century into the 1930s is this little fluted detail, this little angled detail that's on the face of this thing. This is very typical and very appropriate at that time. This strapping, okay, that would have gone on top of here is also very appropriate. We're actually going to have a decorative element going over top of that, and it's going to make these beautiful again. The size of this thing is appropriate to the size of this house and the roof area that we've got up there. There's a lot of water coming off of this roof. Typically on a house from the 20s and 30s, it would be, this is probably a 6-inch, probably 6-inch, more of a 4-inch size, but very typical the way this is done. All new copper on here, looks beautiful. So what happened between 1904 and 1911 is the new family, the Scott family, came in and bought the house and changed it from that kind of late Victorian ideals with the porches and more woodwork, and was really elevated to them with those stone columns and this balustrade and a lot of these details in here. So it's been called a neo-Georgian. I don't think it is. I wouldn't call it a neo-Georgian. I call it neoclassical, but it's certainly kind of the period and very appropriate at that time. But the richness of these materials that, if you look at the original photos, are wood balustrades, porches that come out a little bit like the Kell house that we did up in Wichita Falls, and then it got transformed into this thing in 1911. So the richness of materials here, and the fact that we're trying to copy on the Italian Revival house columns that are very much like this. And the work that we have to do, these columns are solid limestone, okay? And the work that we have to do in order to get solid limestone columns, because most people, what they want to do is they want to cut you the blocks and then your mason lays them up on the job site. This is actually a load-bearing solid limestone column that is supporting that roof system. It's a much harder way to build. It's a much more difficult thing to put up. There's no seams in it. You're seeing actually the grain of the stone in there. It speaks to the richness of the materials that was done in 1911. So we're standing in this pergola that goes out to the tea house. Now, this is something that goes back to original photos. Our firm actually redid this 15, 20 years ago because something blew through here and blew down. And there had been bad repairs, and so we went back trying to build it so that we wouldn't need much maintenance. And so, of course, we used good wood. These are Chatsworth columns, entasis, and good architectural details. This really kind of anchors the garden side of this yard, right? And then, of course, it harkens back to our garage carriage house, right? Because remember, it's both. It's the only remaining, there's two in Texas that were built both for horses and carriages and cars. And so it's kind of a unique carriage house in that that way. But let's go look at the tea house real quick, kind of this garden facility and kind of the many elements of this house, and then we'll walk down to the carriage house. Okay, so you're looking at the restored tea house. It really was in pretty good shape, but you'll see new copper, has these piers that pierce the roof and then have those planters on top. You'll see the copper work that goes around, the restored woodwork inside here, and the repointing of the brick. And really, in a kind of miniaturized sense, you're looking at the house and the details on the house here. This would have been, let's retire to the garden. That's how that would have been used historically, and the way they would have done that. And of course, the roads weren't so busy back then. The hospital wasn't here. You know, this was Quality Hill. You'll see the old Fort Worth Women's House down the street, but all of these wonderful houses here looking towards downtown, this would have been a primo spot, and this would have been kind of a nice area they would have hung out. Now, standing here, I think this is actually one of the more beautiful views of this house. And you know, here you're seeing the tile roof, you're seeing the cladding on the side there, these beautiful gambrel shape up there as it looks around, this kind of rounded rotunda there that kind of pierces out. That's part of the billiards room. Those are the windows we restored. I mean, this is a magical shot right here, looking at this building, looking at these wonderful historic materials, hundreds of years old, that still look freaking unbelievable, okay? Restored windows, restored brick, restored roof, right? Think how simple that is, right? That the restoration of this project really revolved around fixing those things. And then the cornice repair and some of those repairs were due to the roof problems. And so, look, I get a lot of pushback on windows, but our business for the last 30 years has been restoring windows and building new windows. Part of the thing is old growth wood, great design. All they really needed was to be cleaned up, restored, reputtied, reglazed, get the weather stripping working again. And these things work freaking awesome, okay? These things will last another 120 years. Can you imagine putting a production window in here, a Marvin or Pella or an Anderson window in here? Oh my gosh, what a mess that would be. Because why? Well, because it wouldn't match historic profiles, it wouldn't match historic details, you wouldn't have wavy glass, and it would last maybe 20 or 30 years before it rots out. Now we've got a product that's been here 100 years, the historic authenticity is there, the architectural authenticity is there, they belong, they look great, and they're built to last. So don't throw away your windows. We really literally took these out of the frame, took them back to our shop, sanded, restored, repaired these things, didn't require that much, restored the frame in place, brought the windows back out, got the weights working again, got them painted up right, and they look spectacular. This was the reason why we started the 100-year window, is because we go into historic houses like this, where we restore the windows, and we're like, wait a minute, why aren't we building windows like this again? Because they're lasting so long, they're so beautiful, they're so well made, they're built to last and they're beautiful. This is our inspiration, and rightly so, it looks incredible. The carriage house, remember the carriage house, because it was kind of falling apart. The mortar was literally falling out of the brick. It was in terrible shape. Thankfully, the mortar is a sacrificial material. It's meant to be the thing that decays first. So we tested the mortar, we figured out what it was, we've gone back and we've repointed this thing and got it looking beautiful. The other thing you may notice are the columns, right? Before, these wings kind of just hung out there in mid-space, and there was a column here, you may remember, that kind of sat underneath here, okay? The beautiful capitals done by my friends over there at Decorator Supply have redone these capitals because we had pieces of one capital. I don't know if you remember going up into the carriage house, we found the original capitals and the way they were done, which are original to the period, but we had these two columns here and it was kind of weird the way it was laid out. Well, what we figured out, and we found Mark, my project manager, saw in an historic picture that there was two columns on either side. And so it made a lot more sense that you had this beam that extended out that supports that arch there, and this beautiful column supports the end of that thing. It makes so much more sense architecturally, and probably should have been something I noticed, right? Because I'm always talking about how the neck of the column lines up with the beam above. That column was sitting right there. it should have been a clue, as much as I talk about columns, of what was going on there. Anyway, we've got this fixed, and now it's spectacular. Look at our light. We redid that light that we found, thought it was lost. The architect, Norm Alston, did a great job of helping us find the globe that would go there. We restored this light, and now we've got this spectacular entry and this amazing window restoration redo here, inside here, all restoring the past, and it looks spectacular. Okay, so what is left to do? You'll notice that there was this original well that was here that had a bucket. This is working. This goes back, you can tell by the quality of the ironwork that this goes back to that earliest period where these wells were put together, these little seams were put together, but this is really old hand-wrought ironwork, and we're going to get this restored as well. We've got the water tower, this amazing water tower that we think has been torn down for probably 60, 70, 80 years, but we're going to go back with that, we believe, as part of the adaptive reuse. So in a preservation project, there's preservation, which is what we just accomplished. It took about a year. We restored all of these elements, and the house is freaking spectacular. It just looks incredible. Now we've got an adaptive reuse. Like, what are they going to do with it? Because it's still a house. We're not sure what they're going to do. That's in the planning process. That's kind of the next phase, is this adaptive reuse, making this incorporated into all the other things that are going on around here, and really bringing this thing together. Top 5 projects of all time. It's such an honor to have worked on this important house. When I came to Fort Worth 30 plus years ago, the idea of working on this house when I was just a young preservation guy getting into construction would have been unheard of. And now to be able to do it and to be able to have it looking so great is just exciting, and it's an honor, and it's symbolic of Fort Worth. It's symbolic of this great city. And so what an honor. It's restored. It's back to its old self. Hopefully no storms come along. This thing will last another 150 years. It's well built. The materials are incredible, and it's been an honor working on it. Stay tuned, guys, for the adaptive reuse. It could be a year or so before we get back to a plan and trying to figure that out after bidding and everything. But the owners do have a couple plans. They do have some ideas of what they want to do. So stay tuned with that. More to come from Thistle Hill. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.